What's up, everyone? Michael Falk with the Milwaukee Sports Performance Podcast, and I am here to talk to our baseball players today. It is currently January in Wisconsin, and that means baseball season is coming. And in fact, most athletes are starting to ramp up right now. We just had one of our professional players that we support that just left to head down to spring training this week. So baseball has been hot on my mind. We are going to be out in the community screening some local athletes this week and trying to do our part to help our local athletes stay healthy and put a dent in this rise in arm injuries that we've been seeing. So I just wanted to share some of my thoughts that I've been thinking about as we've been setting up this screening program, as we just went through an offseason with some of our professional players, and as we're starting to really ramp up to try to keep our high school kids healthy and performing for their high school teams and their club teams over the upcoming summer, on just some of the trends and thought processes that we're having behind what we're doing with these players and how we're managing off seasons. The first thing that we want to start with is just talking about how what we like to see when we're ramping up is starting with the end in mind. And this is a mistake that we see quite frequently, where players will go through a really thorough bullpen progression, but they'll end at an insufficient amount, right? Or there will be a disconnect between what their high school coaches are expecting them to do and what they prepared their arm to do over the course of the offseason. So what we would like, and our recommendation would be that you actually throw more pitches in your final bullpens than you will be asked to throw in your first outing. Why is this? Well, typically in-game pitches are going to be much more stressful, right? You're going to reach back for that extra mile an hour or two once the competitive juices start flowing than you are going to feel when you're just throwing in a practice setting against your teammates or throwing a bullpen, right? So typically those pitches are more stressful and it's going to have a bigger impact on your arm. The other aspect is most often you're going to go from pitching to first base or to doing something else on the field. We can see athletes accumulate almost 300 throws in any given day. And this is just a lot more than what you typically will experience in a practice or just going to throw a bullpen and then you're done for the day, right? So the workloads don't match up. Too often what we'll see, and we saw this, I don't even want to count how many times last year, players build up to throwing a 50-pitch bullpen, and then they go and are asked to throw 70 or 75 pitches in their first competitive outing, and then their arm hurts afterwards. And it wasn't because the bullpen buildup was insufficient, and it wasn't necessarily the high school coach's fault for asking too much of you, but there was a miscommunication or just a lack of planning on that gap needed to get closed, right? So you either needed to prepare your arm a little bit more in your off-season throwing program, or you needed to start with a lower pitch count. If I had my perfect world, you would ask me what's my recommendation, I really like building up from now through March to about a 50-pitch bullpen, and then trying to throw 40 pitches in that first competitive outing. That should get you through about 2 innings, give or take. And then from there, increasing by 10 to 15 pitches per week as you go through the season. That will get you up to your normal 70, 80 pitch outings within the first 2 to 3 weeks for most players by conference. And we can then maintain there through the end of the playoffs or through the end of the regular season. And as we get into the playoffs, if we need to stretch it out a little bit, that potentially could happen and we'd have the workload to do that. Just having the conversations now, right? What is going to be expected of me? Talking to your pitching coach, your club coach, whoever you're working with, having a conversation of what's safe for your arm from a build-up standpoint, and trying to find a happy middle ground reach where you can prepare your arm for the stress that's going to be asked. One other aspect of starting with the end in mind that I would like people to pay attention to is just pay attention to travel and time off, in particular with spring break, right? So with the timing of spring break, it's a little different every year, but it is not uncommon for it to fall right after you're done with your off-season throwing program at whatever club you're with or, anything like that. And right before the high school season really starts to ramp up. And it can leave players, last year it was an awkward 2-week gap where it was kind of like no man's land. You didn't throw over spring break, then you come right back into practices and games and your arm's a little bit underprepared just because of the time off. So really pay attention to where does that break fall? Where are you going for spring break if you're traveling? And how will you be able to throw? And if so, like how closely will you be able to stick with your throwing routine, and make sure you account for that as you come back? And what do you do those first, 7, 10 days, 2 weeks as you get back into the swing of baseball if you didn't throw very much over that break? That is another common area that we see athletes kind of struggle with some workload related issues and then deal with arm pain or some type of setback. So just really have that plan. With that planning, do not waste throws. This is something that I take every year when I get the opportunity to watch high level throwers compete and throw and prepare when we deal with the pro guys. Those guys are so serious from the time that they walk into the gym and so meticulous with their warm-ups and their throwing routines and their pre-throw routines. And they have a plan for every single day. And not, I'm going to go throw 25 pitches, but I'm going to throw 25 pitches at this percentage point. And I'm really working on feeling my cutter releasing at this spot because I'm trying to get it to move more vertically, right? I am making things up because I'm not the expert in pitch design, but they are that specific, right? And they are using objective feedback, typically with Rapsodos or TrackMan, at a minimum, a radar gun and a camera to see if they are accomplishing what they want to accomplish, right? And they are staying with that plan and iterating that plan based off the results, right? But they are not just going and picking up a ball and starting to chuck. And they are not just going and playing catch out to 300 feet, right? If they're playing out catch out there, it is with a specific intention in mind. And this is the big difference that we see between younger throwers and our more seasoned throwers, is just the attention to detail with that throwing program. So I would really encourage you, if you do not have a plan, if you do not know what you need to work on, if you do not have cues or things that you are trying to improve from the last year, then you need to get with a coach. You need to get assessed and you need to build something so that you can go into every single throwing session with a goal in mind of something that you are trying to accomplish. Okay? It is really, really important. Along the planning aspect, have a physical plan, right? This is the time of season that you need to be prioritizing your training. Even as throwing ramps up, you are not competing, right? It is okay if you are a little fatigued or a little sore as you're throwing a low effort bullpen, right? We need to prioritize our physical training because once the season starts, it is important to lift once or twice a week, 3 times a week if you're lucky, but really you're not going to make that much progress often. You are just trying to maintain the progress that you made over the off season. So you need to have a structured plan of how does your lifting correspond with your throwing? What should you be doing on high effort days, medium effort days, and low intensity days so that you are getting the most out of those throwing sessions, because it is really, really important. Just like you should have a goal in mind as you're throwing a bullpen or as you're playing catch, you should have a goal in mind every time you go to the gym, right? What are the areas that you need to work on? Is it mobility? Oftentimes with younger players, it is getting stronger and more explosive, right? But are there some specific problem areas that you have struggled with in the past? Do you have an injury history of dealing with arm pain or low back pain? Or does your hip bother you every year, right? All of those things should play a role in what are you doing to physically prepare your body for the upcoming season so that you start in a really good spot and then we can try to focus on maintaining. Just like objective measurement is key in the throwing side, I truly believe that objective measurement is key in the physical side, right? Especially if you have any history of arm pain or injuries, whether that be little leaguer's elbow, biceps tendon issues, or just dealing with soreness on the inside of your elbow regularly, right? You need to have an understanding of what does your shoulder range of motion look like? What's your T-spine motion look like? How good's your single leg squat? What is your rotator cuff strength like? And how is your forearm strength? Those things all matter. And if you don't understand where your arm profiles and what types of things that you should be doing, then you are just really doing a random exercise routine, which is almost like jumping in a cage and just throwing a random 25 pitch bullpen with no plan, right? You are not going to get the optimal outcome. These are the type of things that we do this time of year, where we go out in the community or we have athletes come into our office and we will do that profiling just like a college would do, just like a major league club would do with any pitcher that was coming in this time of year, to see where does everything stack up, what things do need to work on, and if everything is great, awesome, then how are we going to maintain that as throwing ramps up? So it is critical. If you don't have a plan, if you don't know where you stack up, please reach out to us. You can schedule a free call with me. We can chat about what that assessment looks like, and we would love to help you out with that. So that physical plan and how it interacts with throwing is critical. The last piece on the critical part is arm care, right? And this term gets thrown around a lot, but there's something that I've been seeing as a trend when we test athletes and just when we talk to people about what does their arm care routine look like, that I see missing quite a bit. I truly think we have made progress on athletes taking their warm-up seriously. I see most athletes that have a set of J-bands and are doing some type of band routine regularly. I see the athletes that are baseball players in gyms often doing a reasonable amount of accessory shoulder work, working on their shoulder blades, working on their rotator cuff, which is awesome. And we really think that's important. What I don't see getting included a lot in these maintenance programs or in these off-season programs is work to really improve strength. So I see a lot of, I'm working on strength of my shoulder and I'm doing 3 sets of 15 of band pull-aparts, or I'm doing strengthening because I do my J-band warm-up 1 set every day. And those are great. And please do not stop doing them. I think they are really important. If we see an athlete that has no arm care routine, that is usually where we start. It is just that as we have seen those getting more widely adopted, now we're seeing some of these other gaps. And one of them is just work on max strength, right? And so it is something that we assess a lot and we see a lot of issues with for athletes, that they really have some max strength deficits. This, from a risk profiling perspective, statistically increases your risk of dealing with shoulder or elbow injuries. We want to see those incorporated into your routine, and they're not something that you can do every day. The analogy that I use is you would not go to the weight room and max effort, 1 rep max deadlift every day, right? You would do that maybe once a week, right? Or maybe once a month, but it would be more periodic. That is the same way that this needs to be incorporated into your throwing routines and into your arm care routines, but something that is not 3 sets of 15 reps to fatigue with a easy band, something that is higher threshold, more effort. We like to use isometrics for this a lot because it really lets the athlete self-guide and self-pace their prescription so that it fits in that way. But there are a million different ways to do it, but it's heavier weight, usually some type of cable machine, dumbbell, or overcoming isometric, targeting specific muscle groups that you might have deficits in or kind of have profiled to have deficits in. And the goal is to really hit those peak thresholds so that we can maintain that over the course of the year. This is a deeper conversation and might be a separate podcast, but how often do you need to do it? Less frequently than you think to just maintain. So now is the perfect time of year to get tested, because if you have a deficit in it, if we could hit it right now 2 to 3 times a week while we're trying to build up and we're not throwing too much, that's enough to make improvements, kind of hit it once every 10 to 14 days throughout the course of the season, where that will be enough to maintain that process or that progress and that strength over the course of the long season so that it doesn't taper off at the end of the year. So maintenance is easier than gain. If we want to gain, now is the time. It's very hard to make progress once you're throwing 70 pitches every 6 to 7 days in a competitive environment, but we can maintain it once we get there. We just want to build that max strength and clear up any of those deficits earlier. So these are just some thoughts from what I've seen over the course of the offseason with our baseball players, and as we're kind of seeing the high school kids start to ramp up here. So start with the end in mind, have a physical and a throwing program, have really good intent behind all of those throws so that we don't waste them, and then really pay attention to that arm care routine and make sure we are hitting all aspects of it and not just focused on the low threshold elements. So hopefully this was helpful and educational. If you have questions about it, I would love to chat more. Feel free to reach out to us through our website. You can book a call with me right there, and I'd love to dive into it. Otherwise, I appreciate your time and listening. We'll see you guys on the next episode.